big year I did and some of his digiscoping tips. So we're gonna talk about digiscoping tonight, which is a unique style of wildlife photography, um, where you're utilizing I think I can do this. Here we go. There we go. Um, we're utilizing the magnification, the powerful magnification of a spotting scope with some form of a digital imaging device hooked behind it. So we've got digi from the digital and the scope from the spotting scope. And what this does for you is it gets massive magnification. Lots of ways of doing it with DSLRs, with point and shoot cameras, with, like micro four thirds and mirrorless cameras. But by far, the most common way of doing it is with the phone. Everyone carries their smartphone around with them. And here's a graphic example and I didn't know this at the time, of tonight's mystery bird being digiscoped with my iPhone attached behind the eyepiece of the spotting scope, utilizing an adapter in between. And that's a real-time photo that had just been taken, um, through the spotting scope. So that's exactly how it looked through the phone attached to the spotting scope. Digiscoping can also be done through binoculars, and I guess a lot of people call that digi-binning, I suppose, to be wholly accurate. But it is a more accessible means of doing it because everyone has it. But you can as well utilize, you know, the the phone behind the binoculars to take photos, and actually use Merlin and everything and identify the bird that you're taking pictures of that way too. So it can be a way to instantly identify birds. But for me, it's a way that I utilize, mostly birds in flight that are flying over fast. Here's a couple examples from the Florida Keys Hawk Watch. Be it a fast-moving peregrine falcon or a flock of swallow-tailed kites migrating over. What I'll do is I'll put that in video mode and kind of just pan along, trying to get a good still frame out of that. But why exactly spotting scopes? Why is a spotting scope more preferred? Quite simply, it's the magnification that you're getting. And you can do that with your binoculars, but it is a little harder because they're not held on a tripod. So with one hand you're trying to focus, and the other hand you're manipulating the phone, trying to take images. It can be pretty tricky with the binoculars. But for the most part, binoculars are at 8 power and 10 power, right? So when you think about that, the um, get out of here. Sorry, I just did something bad. I clicked on the screen to get everyone's face, and I lost my. Come back. There we go. All right. Um, Sorry for the delay. But so we're starting at like 25 power magnification, on the spotting scope, and going up to 60 power, which, that's obviously a lot more magnification. It's anywhere from 250 up to almost 700% more magnification than you have with your binoculars, depending. So it's the main purpose there, the main advantage, excuse me. Spotting scopes, of course, are great for scanning big country, like out on Attu Island here. Great for also, photographing and looking at very distant objects like the moon at 239,000 miles away almost. But most people kind of quit there and only think of this as a tool for distance. And really, spotting scopes can be really good at minimal focus as well, giving macro-esque capabilities at 15 to 20 foot away. This little snow-cap hummingbird is barely over the size of my thumb. He's a little fatter maybe when he popped up like that. But you can see even those tiny little feathers around the eye. You can see all the little rays on there shot through the scope with just my phone. So they can be quite effective. Similarly, you're familiar with the green orchid bees, probably, about the size of your pinky nail. And again, you can see all the little bristles and hairs and things on this green orchid bee flying around. One of the other reasons that I love spotting scopes, and I led and guided professionally and always had to carry a spotting scope, and I got used to it, and I don't like being without it. Here's an example of a hot spot out west. And if you look at the lower right, that line indicates that's a 100-foot distance. So I've drawn that out, and made a circle of that distance from the middle of the parking lot. And let's say you had a 10 power binocular. I think that's reasonable to say at 100 feet, that's probably the limit of what you can see markings and identify a bird by field marks. Medium-sized pass range example, much beyond 100 foot, you're going to start struggling. And, we can argue that it might be more than that, but for this graphic representation, at least when you use 100 foot. Now, this is to scale. We pull out the spotting scope at 25 power, and now everything out to the edge of the green circle will be as big as what I see with the binoculars at the edge of the red circle, right? Be the same subject size. I'll be able to make out the same detail up this far. But as we know, the spotting scopes have zooms, so we can go out to 60 or in some cases even 70 power, and reach way out to here to the edge of the blue circle and have a same size subject that we would have with the 10 power binocular at 100 feet. So to me, I think that adds a lot more versatility and it increases what I call my sphere of identification. How far out can I identify a bird? So I don't ever like being without a spotting scope because something flies by that I can't make with my binoculars. I'm annoyed because I know I could have identified it by carrying the scope around. So that's that. All right, we're going to get into some of the specifics of the digiscoping just again to help lay some groundwork here. This is my kit when I started with Kowa in 2020 that I was using with the 11 Pro Max phone. And that provided a 35 millimeter equivalent, anywhere from 700 millimeter to 3,360 millimeter lens. So that's really a lot of magnification. And people always say, well, how can I tell? It's quite a simple mathematical formula, really. You're taking the focal length of the lens that you're using on the imaging device, and you're literally multiplying that by the power of magnification on the eyepiece. So 28 millimeter is the top lens. At 25 power, the minimum power on a spotting scope is 700 millimeters. And the lower lens, which is a 56 millimeter lens, if I crank that up to 60 power through the 2x lens, I've now got over 3,350 millimeters in lens equivalent. So it's massive magnification. Since then, I've upgraded to the iPhone 14 Pro Max, and that is, has a 3x lens on it, which gives me equivalent up to 4,620 millimeters, right? If we want to be technical, we do have a 1.6x extender that increases the magnification of the spotting scope up to 60%. And then we can just get into unreal magnifications. It's a little bit of a theoretical range of this. It can be used, but obviously at massive magnification, even at the 700 millimeter, stability is going to be an issue. So you've got to have a very stable tripod. You've got to have a very good connection with your adapter, solidly connecting the phone behind the eyepiece. And even then, literally touching the phone to take images could create a lot of shake. So, there's a couple of hacks out there. Use earphones or earbuds that have um, a corded earbuds, that is, that have a volume control in the cord. By hitting the volume also takes a picture, so that becomes sort of a cable release. There's also third-party Bluetooth shutter releases you can buy for your phone. You link it through the Bluetooth and allows you to shoot hands-free. So some of the hacks that we've got there. Here's another graphic example. At the far left is what I see when I turn on the native photo app on my iPhone. You see I've got a 0.5 lens, which is that third lens I didn't talk about. That's a 14 millimeter designed for very wide angle portraits, landscape in particular. Then we've got a 1X, which is a 24 millimeter in this case, the 2X at 48. Now, your eye is basically the equivalent of 1X of magnification, right? And in photo terms, 1X in optical zoom is a 50 millimeter lens. So at 24 millimeter, we're literally about half or twice as wide as your eye would see normally. So when you mount the phone behind the eyepiece, you're always going to have that vignetted circle because the eyepieces on the spotting scopes are designed for use with your eye, right? But when I go to the 2X, you can see automatically that vignette disappears. So just a little bit of a tip as promised. I know Deborah said we're going to have some digiscoping tips tied in, so I kind of took two presentations and mushed them together. And we'll do a little teaser on all of it. Here's another big advantage of digiscoping. It's just with that massive magnification, a lot of people say it's a more ethical style of photography, and that is true. Here's a graphic representation to scale of, the photographer at the right with a 500 millimeter lens. Let's say they have no crop factor. It's a straight 500 with a full size sensor. To fill the frame on a bird the size of, say, a painted bunting, they'd have to be about 8 feet away. Um, Over to the left side, we've got digiscoping, and with the reach of digiscoping to, have that same subject fill the frame, you could literally be almost 40 feet away. So it is more ethical, of course, but even more so, when you're that close to a bird, you have to stalk in and you are changing that bird's behavior. They're very aware of you if you're 8 feet away. Whereas if you're back 30, 40 feet, the bird may be acting more normally and you can capture some of the more natural behaviors as well. So that's another advantage of the digiscoping. Okay, I'm going to move away from this and move into segue into the other part. And to help understand Digiscoping Big Year, you have to understand where I came from. I've been a bird brain most of my life, as Deborah said. I did a lot of research starting as a teenager with raptors in particular, and worked as one of these professional bird bums for about, 10 years or so, bouncing all over the country doing these seasonal field research positions. And then I got into guiding professionally when I moved up to Alaska, places like Attu Island and the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, Denali Park, Nome, Gamble, St. Paul Island, things like that for many years as well. And again, always carrying the spotting scope. Now, this dates back far enough that I predate digital photography while I was doing that, and the quality of these images kind of eked that out. You can tell these are old prints that I've snapped photos of with my phone from those days. Um, there was no internet, there was no social media, there were no cell phones even, so it was a different world. However, I did discover from some of my British colleagues that I'd met doing the Cape May Hawk Watch. They told me how they were experimenting with these disposable film cameras and holding them behind the eyepiece of their spotting scope to document these rare birds. So, because I'm going to places like Alaska, Gamble, where you're seeing lots of rare birds, I thought that's pretty handy. I could stick one of these in my pack when I go out. And this is my first attempt ever at quote unquote documenting a rare bird. That blob in the middle on the right side is a redneck stint that I took with that Kowa scope right there. Back in those days, that was really kind of the best scope on the marketplace. The TSN 2 and 4 had the first ever ones with a fluoride, crystal fluoride lens element in them. But the hard part is it's not like modern digiscoping because you're just looking through an eyepiece, which was staring straight into the scope. So you couldn't even tell if you were looking through um, the scope, let alone what the quality was. If the bird was in focus, you're just kind of pointing it in the direction and hoping blindly that the picture will come out. You don't know for another week or two when you get the film back if you actually got anything. So it's not quite like digiscoping today. At any rate, all of that, guiding and birding professionally, and then this passion for optics and then optics, photography through optics led me to where I am today. I've been for the last 20 years working as an optics rep to the birding and nature markets, which allows me to meet a lot of great people. Some of these folks you know well, Mariah and Luis and the right next to me. And then my son Austin, that Deborah you were asking about, there he is. He's working the Rio Grande Valley Birding Festival with me this last fall. So lots of cool people. And I get to travel all over the country, going to events like this. And typically, one of the most common or most interesting topics that people want to know about is digiscoping because it is a challenge. You're coupling two devices together that were never meant to work together. They weren't designed that way initially. So there is a lot of challenge in trying to make these work. And these are just a handful of the events that I attend every single year. Some you're very infinitely familiar with, of course, Space Coast, the hometown favorite down below at North Shore Birding Fest. And we sponsor the Florida Keys Hawk Watch, so I get to go there a couple times a year. But I also get to all these other events in the course of every year as well. So I wind up getting a pretty decent yard list or year list, I should say, just based on the fact that I get to go to all these incredible events. It's the perfect time to be there. And even while you're working the booth, you do wind up having extra time in the mornings and sometimes in the afternoons to sneak out. And while I can't join the field trips because I'm vending, I can, still sample a lot of the local color and catch up with a lot of the local specialties. So I usually have a pretty good year list based just on that. And of course, living here in Florida as well. Um, Now in 2020, when the pandemic hit, I was used to traveling 20 to 30 weeks a year, and all of a sudden, we hit this wall where everyone's at home. Um, and I guess maybe I was looking for a new challenge or something. I was going a little stir crazy, although also oddly enjoyed at the same time watching migration go through my yard because I'm never here. But I started doing something weird, and I'd always digiscope birds along the way. But for the first time, I started counting them. And in 2020, we had Space Coast Bird and Wildlife Festival to kick off the year. Then I went to the Port Aransas Whooping Crane Fest in February in Texas. And then while we were at the San Diego Birding Fest at the end of February into March is when everything started hitting. And even to the point where it's like, wow, are we going to be able to get home? Because everything was shutting down around us, even as we were finishing that festival. So after that, I was stuck at home, but counting up the birds, I was really surprised at the end of 2020 that I managed to catch up with 342 bird species that I digiscoped. My rules for my own made-up game, the digiscoping year listing, was that it had to be taken through the scope or the binocular. I'll count that as well, but 99 probably percent of the birds that I shoot are through the scope. And it has to be identifiable. If it's an identifiable image taken through the Kowa product, I get to count on my year list. Now, the next year, things started opening up after the second half of the year a little bit, starting June, July. Some of the events started coming back cautiously, and we started traveling a little bit again. So that year, I got 518 bird species, which amazed me. It's like, wow, I had no idea that I was, digiscoping that many birds in a year. I will say that was capped with a Costa Rican trip in December. So it added some different stuff. Like every year, the following year in 2023, kicked off with doing a big day, or more appropriately, maybe a century run to kick off the year list each year with some of my buddies here in Charlotte County. Brant Julius was the first one to join me. And I remember we went down to the local park a little after 4 a.m. and heard buck, buck, buck. And we're like, wow, that's whippoorwill call, and I shined the flashlight in the general direction it was coming from, and bam, that's what we saw. So I turned off the flashlight. I said, I'm going to go get my scope because I'd never gotten a really good digiscope picture of that. And came back, set it up, turned the flashlight on, took this picture, and uh, Eastern whippoorwill became the first bird on my year list, and also the first bird that I digiscoped that year. This is the same whippoorwill picture on the sort of the cover of the Birdwatchers Digest magazine, BWD article that I wrote for July, August 2024. If you want to see more of this story, you can go there and read it. Anyway, that led to what became my Kowa Big Year. On that big day, because it was more about seeing birds and hearing them, putting them on the year list than photography, which would slow me down. I think I only shot 9 bird species that day. But as always, I just shoot the birds that present themselves. And before long, by the end of that first week, just running into the cool local specialties that you have as well in your backyard, mostly at least. I developed quite a list, and included some rarities like a summer tanager male that was down here. And for me, a new one was a broad-winged hawk that landed right in my backyard in January, in the first week of January. I'd never seen one perched in the yard in winter before. And something big news for us, it's not such a big news for you, is we got our first ever gray-headed swamp hens in the county that year as well. So that was, rare locally. Of course, we've got the Pine Flatwoods and Babcock Webb Wildlife Management Area and the beaches and other things to build the list. And by the end of that first week, I'd already digiscoped over 100 bird species, which again was kind of surprised at how easily that came. I had no intention of doing a big year. It's something I just do for fun every year, though, at this point. It's something that kind of developed as we went on. I took one Western trip for a weekend out to visit my friends at Phone Scope in Utah as well. Picked up a few birds there and ended January at 148 bird species that I digiscoped. Now, like I said, I do those normal sort of domestic events every year, but 2023 was special because I got a number of surprise or extra bonus, I would say, opportunities. And one of those came mid-January when the organizers of the Columbia Bird Fair contacted me and said, "Hey, we're looking for someone to do a digiscoping workshop. Wondering if you could come down and do that for us at our festival next month." I'm like, "Yes." Yes, I could come to the birdiest country in the year, in the world, excuse me. It's held in the city of Cali. And again, the city itself is really tough to see birds in. It's very populated, and you got to drive for about an hour to get into birding habitat. And because I was working a booth and doing events and things, I didn't get a huge list by Colombian standards, but still, it was Colombia and it was fantastic. You can see again, that is Luis Iglesias' hometown. So I invited him to come and help me with the logistics and be my guide. Mariah came along as well. This is us giving the digiscoping workshop that they wanted. Um, but got out to do some birding as well. So a lot of really cool birds. One I've always wanted to see, the striated manakin, was one of my first targets that I picked up on the first day. But Colombia has 150 species of hummingbirds and countless colorful tanagers as well, including the local specialty, the multicolored tanager was sort of um, a local favorite. So picked up a lot of those birds, and then went straight from there to the birdiest city in the world, San Diego, for the San Diego Bird Fest, and picked up some other birds that, while we see some of these here, some we certainly don't. Ferruginous hawk and yellow-billed loon being outliers. A surf bird is not something I expect to get here. But looking at some of those specialties, by the time February ended and the San Diego Bird Festival wrapped up, I had already had 336 Digiscope species. And I knew that I had another big hit coming because this wasn't a surprise and something we'd been working on since the year prior. We'd created a digiscoping only team to compete in the Champions of the Flyway Bird Race for conservation. And it's sort of it's a takeoff on the World Series of Birding, but on a global stage held in Eilat, Israel. March 23, we went over there. This is our team, my boss, Paul, my colleague, Rob Wilton from the UK, myself, um, Eric from Hannah and Eric Go Birding. Hannah was on the all women's team that Kowa sponsored, and Eric came along as well. So I said, "Well, why don't you join us on our team?" He did. And then again, my son Austin made up the team. And we digiscoped just under 100 species during the event, but more importantly, between us and Women in Step team, the two Kowa teams, by far demolished the competition in fundraising for the red-breasted goose, which was the conservation cause this year. Birding the desert regions naturally, this is actually a green area in the Negev Desert, gives you a lot of specialties, but Israel and a lot in particular is a huge migration corridor for raptors and all the birds that wintered in Africa that are spreading across Europe and Asia to breed, kind of funnel through this area. So, you add some of the European migrants and the raptors and some water birds, you wind up with quite a selection of birds. The one in the center is a Kretschmar's bunting at top left, cream-colored courser, pygmy cormorant over on the right. Just some really cool birds, white-throated kingfisher. March ended at 463 birds. So next up was the Cape May Optics sale, and went up to Cape May, New Jersey, and picked off again some species that are harder to see, not impossible, in my area of Florida at least. You might you get golden crowned kinglet and maybe red-breasted nuthatch a lot more than we do in Southwest Florida. But still, picked up some of the local color there. And when I came back by mid-April, of course, we're into the peak of spring migration, so just my own backyard in the hood, we're hopping with a lot of new birds added. And by the end of April, I had 514 birds that I digiscoped. Again, most all of these taken through the spotting scope with my phone. So occasionally it might be one or two with through the binoculars, but I think all of these were probably phone shots through the scope. again, my record ever was 519, so or 18, excuse me, was my best year ever. So I'm like, wow, I'm gonna crush my year total. I wonder how high that's gonna get. And it didn't take long. My next stop in the beginning of May was the biggest week in American birding, which of course is a fantastic migration location. They call it the warbler capital of the world. Given the fact that I live in Florida and we just had migration here, a lot of the warblers I wasn't as interested in because I'd already seen them. But for me, this became more the sparrow capital of the world. But before I even made it to my hotel, I broke the record with American woodcock being number 519, sitting at the side of the road in the headlights of the car. But I continued on chasing down birds I hadn't seen at this point. It's like, okay, I'm in new territory. How high can I push this thing? But still at this point, it was mostly largely a personal endeavor, bird like a black-throated blue I'd seen and heard numerous times because they are a Caribbean migrant and common on the Gulf Coast, but I hadn't got a picture of one yet, so that became a new bird there. Some of the thrushes. A Kirtland's warbler, of course, is something I'm going to chase if one shows up, so the male Kirtland's warbler was a nice addition. But again, like I said, sparrows. I live south of Sparrow Country. You folks are in it a little bit. They kind of stop most of them where you are in the state, though. So I hadn't seen any in my hood. So things like Henslows and clay-colored and Lapland longspur, white crown, white-throated American tree sparrow were all new, and an adult little gull was a pleasant surprise that I hadn't counted on. So wrapped that up and went straight from there over to the Indiana Dunes Birding Festival, another great festival of similar birds in the Indiana Dunes State Park and State Forest, respectively. Added Louisiana water thrush, olive back pipit, and or I mean olive-sided flycatcher, excuse me, Canada warbler, some of these others, and finished May at 5.5 to 5.6. Well, return to Florida, in by mid-May, and my latitude, certainly migration's long since over. Sounds like you folks still have some interesting things. Red Start still hanging out and things, but for the most part, it's pretty slow. And I'd already long since kind of caught up with most of the local specialties, so I didn't get any real birds in February and June. It wasn't until I traveled again in July to the Global Bird Fair, which is held in Rutland Waters in the United Kingdom. Global Bird Fair is the biggest trade show in birding and the largest attended event in all of birding. It's all about the goods and services of birding products and travel. It's mostly a travel show, to be quite honest with you. About 350 vendors occur there. And so it's very busy, and I don't have much time for birding. I don't have a car there. So it's just kind of stuff I was able to nip behind the hotel, in the gardens, or maybe at the event. But a handful of things like robins and long-tailed tits and dunnock and wood pigeons added to the list. I went straight from there to the montane regions outside of Denver for the Colorado field ornithologist and the Western field ornithologist joint meeting. And in that montane habitat, of course, a lot of new birds that we don't see locally, and things started racking up pretty quick. So all of a sudden in July ends, I'm almost 100 species over my past record. I'm like, this is fun. Um, Somewhere about this point, and maybe even when I had, I guess no, it would have been when I shattered my record from the year before. I made a comment on social media saying this is going to be a big year, and I put it little b, little y, big year. But I think many people took that as literally a big year, and I hadn't been doing this like a big year at all. I hadn't been traveling to places even that were close at hand to chase birds. It's just what I was seeing as I was traveling, pretty much. Granted, birding hard while I was there, but that was it. But while I was at the Global Bird Fair, it was kind of interesting because people from all over the world started coming up to me saying, "How's your big year going? How's your big year going?" And I realized that people were aware of this silly thing that I was doing. And I became a little more intense at that point. I'm not going to lie. So Colorado, I spent even longer hours and then went and did back-to-back shows with Southwest Wings Birding Festival and the Southeast Arizona Birding Festival. Um, you know, uh, so was birding crazy there. And Arizona is such a great spot. It's August in Southeast Arizona sounds crazy, but that's when the monsoon season has come through and everything starts to green up and it becomes a secondary, like a second spring. The birds start singing and nesting and being more active. So it's a really wonderful time to be there. And David Simpson was there for both those events. He can attest to that as well, I'm sure. But added a lot of birds, 13 species of hummingbirds that I encountered there, some of the specialty raptors of southeastern or southwestern United States. Um, a lot of cool birds that you probably all recognize or may not, but there's a lot of different birds to see there. So I wrapped up leaving Arizona with 689 bird species on this year, having added 77, and we're still, only about maybe two-thirds of the way through the month. On the last day of August, I don't have to tell you about this. You probably remember a little thing called a dahlia hit, and happily it was not as big a threat to our region as some of the others that have come since on the same path. I know folks in the Panhandle was a different story for, but where I was not too terribly intense, so I was able to get out and bird in those bands and picked up a lot of the tropical terns, the bridled and sooty terns, and black tern was a new bird for me for the year. I just should have caught up, but I hadn't. But then all of a sudden, this group of five flamingos came by, and I was like, "Wow, look at that!" So that was the second group to be seen after only the ones on the Sanibel Causeway, and it was like, "Whoa, two different groups, within a half hour with each other. What are the chances?" And then, of course, we know the rest of the story. Hundreds showed up and spread all through the U.S. on that same storm. So again, end of the month, 694 bird species, and roll into September. I took a trip down to the Florida Keys in beginning of September, and picked up some of the Keys specialties that I hadn't seen. I'd missed Swainson's warbler in spring migration, so I was happy to catch up with him. And then white-crowned pigeon and black-whiskered vireos, and there was a vagrant Lysagras flycatcher kicking around down there that I added to the list. Um, the list jumped a little bit more. October, I had only one trip to Cape May, and it was kind of uneventful, really. I ran into the salt marsh and sharp-tailed sparrow, the and then a Eurasian widgeon, and that may have been it. I'd only added 18 bird species in the 2.5 months prior, so October was at 707. Now, earlier in the year, I had set a goal for myself. I was kind of thinking, what could I possibly see? And was looking at all the travel, and I thought that 750 seemed like a really good total that could be reachable. But at this point, I had one more trip left to the Rio Grande Valley Birding Festival in South Texas, and got down there with high hopes, thinking that it was a doable number. But unfortunately, I missed a lot because it rained and rained and rained every single morning. It seemed like it would clear up in the afternoon once we got to the vending area, but in the mornings, this is what all the birds look like. You can see the spotting scope, and I looked the same if I'd taken a selfie. Just drenched every single morning. The rain gear just didn't cut it, but did run into a number of the specialties that you'd expect in the lower Rio Grande Valley, the common paraki and olive sparrow and kiskadee and clay-colored thrush and some of the others. Um, and I left the Rio Grande Valley at 724, far short of my 750 that I'd set for myself. But that was the last trip I had scheduled. Kicking around locally, I did catch up with three other birds, two that I not caught up with that were there all along. Of course, mangrove cuckoo is just hard to actually see, let alone get a digiscoped image. Same with least bittern. I'd heard least bittern hundreds of times, but just hadn't gotten one in the scope. And then there was an unusual, uncommon Franklin's gull that was around that I managed to track down. So I ended at 727, and I'm looking around. It's like, that's really kind of it. I could make a trip to Miami and add five or six more with some of the specialty, exotic species down there maybe, but was not going to hit my 750 mark. And I posted it up. It was a great year. I exceeded my goal by a huge order of magnitude, really. Um, and Within days, I got this call from a good friend of mine, Herbert Bayarahunga, who I've known from the festival circuit for really 20 plus years now. And he said, Mr. Jeff, he said, I was wondering if you would like to come and speak to us at the International Conference for Women Birders. We thought it'd be good to have you on on the speaking. And you could do a workshop to help with our young guides, both the Ugandan women birders, as well as some of the young developing male guides as well that were going to be in attendance, and give them a digiscoping workshop. Now, this was all of like 10 days away. I'm like, you want me to come to Uganda in 10 days? Okay, yeah, we'll see what we can do. I'll see if I can clear up my schedule. So this was a shocker, kind of a stay from execution, if you will, because I was done. I'd tapped out. So I went there and was proud to represent Kowa and to teach, these young women in the Uganda Women Birders program some new skill sets. They're an amazing group and it's an amazing program that gives opportunities to these women in a country that doesn't really support women in business that much. So it gives them a career path. They go through a 3-month training course and come out with a license that's recognized by the country of Uganda and allow them to start their career as wildlife guides. So it's really wonderful. Um, and here we are, got my stage time, challenged some of the local NGOs to how we could work together to help some of these young folks get the gear they need to get started, which was one of the common complaints that they said one of their challenges is just getting the gear, the basic tools they need to do the job. I did bring as much as I could and left it over there. During the event, but that only goes so far. And here we are with one of the about 20 different groups that came through. We did this for about 3 hours, letting everyone have some hands-on time and teaching them what I could about digiscoping after the talk. But then it got on to a little bit of birding, and it's been about, I think it was 7 days for what is normally a 15-day tour. And so it was um, rapid fire to say the least, but I'd never been to Africa. It had been a lifelong dream. So here I was, Uganda, which is known as the Pearl of Africa, which is known for obviously incredible wildlife opportunities. And all of these were Digiscope. The one thing about Digiscope, you're mostly on a truck. You can't set up a tripod on. So I was shooting off of homemade bean bags that I'd made and kind of slapping the scope on the roof and shooting that way. But I wasn't there to shoot the wildlife. I certainly did and enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong, but had a mission at this point. So by the time I left Uganda, 329 birds seen and 280 live birds. And of those 329, I managed to get pictures of 238, which I thought was really good considering the challenges faced. The first bird I got was African thrush, and then they just started piling from there. Um, and saw all kinds of different species throughout the day. Um, Different birds that I won't get into because I'm trying to keep this short. But just an idea of some of the marvelous birds you can see there. I know what they all are, but don't have time. Shoebill, the amazing shoebill is the one bird. If you go to Uganda, you absolutely want to see the iconic dinosaur of a bird. So wonderful. We did get to see him and many, many, many other incredible species, many new families entirely for me. Being a raptor fan, I loved the raptors that we had. Um, there are the various eagles and vultures, owls. By the time I finished, I left Africa with 965 Digiscope yearbirds, literally over twice what my previous year had been, so far above what I ever thought I would be able to Digiscope in a single year. I was elated. And I posted this to social media, so I can't believe what a year this has been, what a fantastic ending this is. And instead of saying that's really great, Jeff, the thing that was amazing is social media being what it is like, you can't stop at 965. You're so close. So, I was thinking, what can I do? Where can I go to get those species? And while I was thinking about this and reading through these comments, another comment was there from another dear friend from a long time, a gentleman that probably a lot of you have met and know, um, Carlos Betancourt from the Canopy family, co-owner, was formerly the lead guide for many years, and now he's both that and co-owner of the business, the Canopy Tower, Canopy Lodge, Canopy Camp, respectively. There was a message from him. He said, Amigo, come down here. Um, let's finish this in Panama. So I contacted Carlos. At this point, it's the 20th or the 21st of December. There's little time left. I go, Carlos, realistically, if I come down, even if I could carve out a couple days, it would be right in the middle of the holiday season, sandwiched between Christmas and New Year's. I can't do that to you or your family. He goes, nonsense. He said, I've already talked to the family. I've talked to the company. We're doing it. We're going to set your bar and finish it in Panama. He said, and bring my nephew. He said, no, to him, that's my son, Austin, again. So down we went for 2 days. Um, got there late in the evening. Um, on the one day, did one full day of birding um, with Carlos Betancourt in his backyard, arguably one of, if not the best guide in the world. He's been voted the best guide in the world 2 times in international competition. It was pretty easy to track down the birds, even these fast flying tropical birds, which are hard to digiscope. Carlos knows exactly where they are and knows how to put you on them. So it didn't take long at all. Before lunch, our first morning, my thousandth bird was the white-tailed trogon that I digiscoped. And there's Carlos giving me the thumbs up. Here's Austin and Carlos together in the center, and us back at the ranch. We had almost a whole full day. Actually, we did have a full day of birding left and wound up getting 1,050 bird species before we left, just to add some extra to it. And that was the year. And again, if you're interested in really reading more of the story, you can track down this article in July, August last year in BWD magazine. And I thank you very much. We can move on to questions. I've got this slide here that I put in the chat already. If you have questions on the product or interested in getting products, you can contact me via email. You can follow Kowa Sporting Optics, Facebook, Kowa Sporting Optics US, Instagram is Kowa Sporting Optics US, and at YouTube. If you look up Kowa Sporting Optics, you can find a great deal of digiscoping videos and whatnot. And our webpage, of course, is kowaoptics.com. So I'll stop my share at that point, and I guess we can go straight into any questions if there are any. And we'll
Okay,
check
well,
chat.
first, thank you so much. That was
Oh,
terrific.
yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Oh, like great birds. Oh,
Yeah, it was a great opportunity. I'm very fortunate. And the crux of this whole thing is not that, I'm any great birder or anything else. It just is really a testament to how wonderful all these birding events are, these great birding events. And, you've got a couple right in your backyard that are spectacular and well organized. So I don't have to tell you, kind of preaching the choir, but it's a great way to go and see these birds, by visiting these events. And that's the moral of the story for me. That year was really all about the birding events and opportunities that I had. The fact that I had good gear and I'm a quick digiscoper because I've been doing it so long, you know, is sort of secondary to the fact that, without those opportunities, those great opportunities of these birding events couldn't have happened. So, let's see. We can chat here.
yeah, we do have a question.
Okay.
How do you travel with your scope? Carry on? Question.
Yes, I do. Um, typically, I'll ship some gear to the festival. I'll have all the gear there anyways, but I usually travel with like the 66 or maybe even our little 55 millimeter. And I literally put that in my backpack with my computer when I go, because I don't want to be left behind with that. And then I've got a small travel tripod that I'll put um, sometimes in my check bag, or even if I may carry a larger carry-on with a travel tripod in it, so that I don't get caught in a lurch without gear.
All right,
Um,
and we have another one. How do you get birds in flight when you are having to juggle the phone and trying to find the birds?
right. So two ways with the scope, if it's at distance at least, and it's, at a low angle, I can follow with the scope, slap the phone on there, and usually I'll shoot video for that. It's the same trick I use for warblers in a tree. I'll shoot video at the highest resolution and kind of follow the warbler around in the tree, and it's behind limbs, but I can see the movement, right? And I follow it around with one finger utilizing the focus wheel, and the other on the shutter, as need be, and I'm moving that around. And lo and behold, eventually it comes out in that one open branch for like 3 frames, then drops back down. And then I can just peel through the video and find that frame and just select a screen grab, for a digital. I do that a lot with flying birds as well. I'll shoot video and then peel out a screen grab.
What's the program to grab it from the video?
I literally just use like the native. I hit the volume and the off button at the same time and click, on the phone just to take it. But there are some, um, oh, what's the one? Gosh, there are some third party. I tend to don't use any of the third party stuff. I don't like to say I'm lazy. I prefer the term economical with my time and energy, energy conscious, things of that nature. But I tend to just try and keep things as simple as possible, without a lot of extra gear or extra programs. So
All right, amazing,
that's
interesting, and informative. Thank you.
Thank you. The thing to use to attach the phone to the scope is another question. That's a digiscoping adapter. The one I use is made by PhoneScope. It's SKOPE .com. But there are a lot of others too. Again, you've got my email in the chat. Let me see if I can get it in there again. There it is again. Uh, you can copy that, take a picture of that. Feel free to email me specifically, and there's a bunch of different adapters that are out there that all work very well, some better than others. So that's gets into a whole different thing. Any other questions?
Brennan asked, what species would you say was the most frustrating to
Oh,
digiscope during your big year?
the most frustrating ones were the ones that got away, probably. And the one in particular that just absolutely killed me, I had to walk away muttering. Um, was kind of a special bird. It was during the Champions of the Flyway event in Israel, and it's a bird that is rapidly declining across the world. Like disturbingly so. The European turtle dove. And I came around this corner at this sewage plant. There's no one out there. It's out in the middle of the desert. There's like nobody there. And here's this European turtle dove sitting on a dead branch at eye level. The sun's behind my shoulder. I mean, it just couldn't have gotten any better, with this perfect background behind it. I'm like, oh, they set up the scope, and the second I put the phone on, it flushes off, and I look up, and here's this guy with like a dip net that had come around the corner, like in this thing of nowhere. And it turns out he's the guy that does like testing for mosquitoes and whatnot, happened to come at that moment. He does it like once a month, he said. And it was at that precise moment, and that bird flew off, and I never saw another one. But I think, given the scarcity of that bird, it's a bird that's mentioned in the Bible and other stuff. So in Israel's got special, it's treated a little differently. It's just got a lot of panache, and the fact that it got away, that's one of the ones that hurt me. You scope wolves in Yellowstone. Yeah, the digiscoping. Yeah, you have to use digiscoping out there in like Lamar Valley and things. The name of the magazine is BWD Magazine, formerly Birdwatchers Digest. They brought it out of the ashes. Um, Ever lead a group digiscoping only workshop in South America? Yeah, I would. Actually, unfortunately, I canceled one that we are going to do in Tranquilo Bay this year only because it just didn't work out. The timing was bad, and it was overlapping with 2 events, and I had to tell them no, one of our partners. But I think in the next couple of years, we'll be doing some more of that stuff. So keep an eye on the Kowa website. Always doing sort of the simple workshops at most of these birding events. But yeah, we're going to be doing some digiscoping trips with some of our strategic partners globally. So yeah, that's something to keep an eye on. All right. Well, with that, I guess I thank you all. Again, you've got my contact information up there, so feel free to reach out with emails, and I'll be glad to assist with any of the stuff. Anyone interested in purchasing gear, I can offer a discount for those that attended tonight. So again, you can drop me an email and give you a little bonus being part of Orange County. And Deborah, don't forget to hit me up for a donation for
For
your
sure. For
fundraiser.
sure.
You
Yes,
need to put some Kowa
Donation.
Optics on there, I think. So,
Okay, I'll talk with
yeah.
you.
Okay. I know people.
Um,
Sounds like a good cause.
Yes.
All right.
Excellent. Just tell us about that small scope that you're marketing.
So the little scope, the little 55, I don't have it with me. It's not far. I could go get it, but it's a scope that weighs just over 2 pounds. And it's one of the lightest weight scopes. It's still part of our Prominar scope series. So our 99, our 88, our 66, and our 55 millimeter have all been redone over the last 4 years. So they all have the highest grade components front to back. The 55 is a compact, and it's kind of like a compact binocular. The great thing about a compact binocular, you can shut them down and stick them in your pocket. But that comes at an expense to have that small of a product. And the compact spotting scope is no different. Um, because of the very short size, it's literally about this long. It only functions at 17 to 40 power magnification because the magnification is due in part to the eyepiece, and then the secondary part of that is the length of the barrel between the focusing lens and the end of the objective lens. So when you shorten that, even though it's the exact same eyepiece we're using on all the other scopes, instead of 25 to 60, it functions at 17 to 40 power. And then similarly on the big 99, the same eyepiece functions at 30 to 70 power. So it's just because, and that's again due to the length of that front objective barrel being the secondary component that affects magnification.
But being so convenient to carry,
Yeah.
worth it.
Mhm.
It's really good. And a lot of times 40 power is as high as any of those compact scopes. And there are a lot of times where that's more than enough. And starting at 17 power and then having a close focus of like 12 feet, I really love it for, the close work too. Because if I got a larger bird close, a lot of times with the bigger scopes, I can't even fit the whole bird in there. So there's that power magnification being 17. And that was one thing they commented on the Florida Keys Hawkwatch this year too, is that they found that better for watching you flocks across a big front when, in the scope, like when the swallow-tailed kites were coming, or if they were spread out, they could fit a lot more in at 17 power than, at the 25 power of the bigger scope. So time and place for everything.
And I want to just say kudos about the binoculars.
Yeah,
Kathy can mention that. She's been using.
yeah. Has it been 2 years now that we've been using it? 3 years? They
Yeah.
work so well, and kids are not easy on equipment, and
No,
they're they're working great.
great. Oh,
We're
so
gonna
glad to hear
put
it.
them, yeah, we're gonna put them on a wish list for the summer camp I work out. We're like, yeah,
Okay.
we need to get these because
Sounds good. And then, I mean, if there's interest in a digiscoping only workshop to South America, Deborah, you could always put it together. Let me know.
Okay, okay.
There you
It'd be
go.
an Orange Audubon exclusive.
yeah.
Yeah, huh?
All right. Much.
All
Okay,
right.
thank you.
See
Thank
you
you
later.
all again.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Night, everybody.
Yeah,
Good night.
see you next week. Blue Gardens, everybody.